Did you know that in 2004, with the release of The Incredibles movie, a video game based on it was also launched? In this video, I'll share my abridged playthrough of the movie tie-in through storyline comparisons, gameplay and visual differences, and unique features that you won't find in the film. Let's start with a brief overview of both versions. The Incredibles is about a superhero family who lives a normie life in suburbia until Papa decides to live his glory days and drags the rest of his family into his problems, heroics. This leads to a heartwarming adventure with high-energy fights and iconic one-liners to make this my favorite Pixar movie. The game, published by the company of my childhood, THQ, features levels based on the film, most of it though being on Syndrome's base. Cool, so you'd think you'd be able to switch between members of the Incredibles family because that's how it's advertised, right? Well, it's more like you're Mr. Incredible with the other three sprinkled in. More on this later. There's 18 missions which the developers claim will take 15 hours to beat, but unless you're a completionist or a child, I think not! The Game Boy Advance version is a bit different from the others and its changes are listed here. Now that you have some background, it's time to compare the stories. We start the game off at a bank heist led by Talking Mime Guy. Serving as a tutorial, you switch between Mr. Incredible and Elastigirl fighting his henchmen. But this ends a little bit differently than the movie. After the superhero's cancellation, the game picks up at this burning down apartment with Bob the Savior and Frozone, who you never get to play as. Mirage Mommy reports her findings to He Who Must Not Be Named because seriously, Syndrome is also not in the game either. And here we have Dash, who's running incredibly late to school. But back to Mr. Incredible, who's landed on Nomanazin Island where he's put to the test against minions and bots. Lots of them. Check out the scene where Elastigirl is getting ready to jet off and save her troubled husband. After all that, you're still playing as Bob?
I'm not happy, Bob. Not happy.
After 6 missions of playing Mr. Incredible, I'm playing Elastigirl. And yes, the kids have their time to shine. What in the... Instead of Syndrome capturing the family, they meet up in the rocket bay.
Houston, we have a problem.
What is it?
The power to the entire silo is out.
So you gotta prepare the rocket, switching between the parentals, and by the way, this mission as Bob right here is the bane of my existence. An appropriately named Save the World mission concludes the story as the family saves Metropolis from the Omnidroid. Roll the credits as you run around the wreckage you've just caused. There's cutscenes taken from the film to fill in gaps between missions for anyone who hasn't seen the movie to kind of get the gist of what's going on, but also how have you not seen the movie? It's been 20 years. Now that you have a taste of what this game has to offer, let's dig a bit deeper with the visuals. To set some expectations, let's remember that this was the tech used for this game. Now with that established, we got some Walmart models of the Incredibles. The most notable feature has to be these crackhead bug eyes that pop out, especially during cutscenes, so it's really hard to focus on anything else. But at the same time, this doesn't take away from the enjoyment. These characters are all passable, it's fine. Unsurprisingly, both versions of the supersuits are a one-to-one copy, but I will say, the expressions on their faces is really well animated. The environmental graphics also have this early 2000s chunky charm to them. I mean, look at this laminar flow. There's enough detail for me to get immersed in each setting though, and the fact that I can explore all of them for myself, man, that masks any issues that I had. This rings true especially for Dash's level where he figures out that he can run on water. The difference here is night and day, but who cares when you can make loops in caves? Dash, you're so cool, Dash. You're so cool, Dash. Let's move on though to what really matters, the gameplay experience. There's an instinctive moveset for each family member. You got Bob and Helen who have the light attack, your grab, heavy attack, which is also known as an Incredimove. That basically drains this meter every time you use it. In YouTube videos, this is what they use to switch scenes. For Dash, you move with the analog stick and you hold down whatever the special button is. For me, I was playing on GameCube, so that was why. And he gets an extra boost, but you can't hold it or else he'll faint. Similar to Dash, Violet will turn invisible when you hold the special button once again, and she'll revert once the meter drains too. Since the parents are mostly used in the game, I'll touch on them first. The pairing between the vibration and knockback when attacks connect is super satisfying, with the intensity being a bit higher with the Incredimoves. It's pretty much the same as basic combat in any other superhero game. It definitely gets repetitive though, and you could try mixing this up by throwing objects, but I always found myself getting punished either by immediately getting damaged or missing my opponent. This same repetitive combat applies to the enemies as well. For the second half of this game, playing as Mr. Incredible is pain. This is a joke. This rocket silo mission has you jumping between these cursed claws that are just so awkward to reach, and with Mr. Incredible's short jump length, you have to maintain his momentum throughout the jump or else you're gonna miss. What? And when you miss, you have to do this walk of shame back to the platform just to start his jumps all over again. And it's just a cycle of sadness. The second most infuriating thing, anything that has to do with these crosshairs. First of all, the sensitivity is just too high. I can't control the crosshair at all, which gives me motion sickness. And on top of that, all this button mashing gives me arthritis. I get it, he's the main, but how many levels of playing the most boring character with the movement of cardboard should we have to tolerate? The Elastigirl missions in contrast are a breath of fresh air. Not only does her reach make it easier to target enemies, she also one-shots them, which I don't even think Mr. Incredible can do. I would love to play with her in more than 3 missions, but even this limited time has shown me that Mrs. Incredible would be amazing for a fighting game. So if playing with the parents feels like your typical but janky superhero game, how does the kids feel like? Well, for Dash, his levels are comparable to, depending on your generation, any of these games. Weaving your way through oncoming traffic and navigating Nomanison's island is a really cool experience, but to top it off, running on water as Dash to just get a little tease of what it's like, chef's kiss. Playing as Violet, on the other hand, is like... MJ missions in Spider-Man. At least give her the stick to bop people over the head like she did in the movie. If you dislike stealth missions as much as I do, just skip this level. There's one Super Monkey Ball-esque level where Violet and Dash merge into one, and I feel that this is executed really well. While I struggle angling the ball at some points, mowing down enemies while maintaining momentum is a pretty fun challenge. Which brings me to the climactic Omni-Droid showdown in Metropolis. As fulfilling and heart-racing as the movie makes this seem, in the game, it's a letdown. Not me thinking I could be Dash and Violet. You only get to play as Bob here as you switch your attention between retrieving Syndrome's remote and protecting your family by throwing rocks at the Omni-Droid's head. That's actually it. Remember how I mentioned earlier how Frozone isn't really in the game, you don't get to play as him? Well, Samuel L. Jackson is technically in the game. Okay,
That's
new
what
game.
I'm talking about.
This
Let's
game...
get this thing on.
That is Samuel L. Jackson. It has to be.
Want to get those guys out of your way?
Press X to
Press
grab
this button
henchmen.
To grab guys from far away.
The rest of the core cast is included in the game besides Mr. and Mrs. Incredible, and they try making up for it, although at least for Holly Hunter's case,
A woman to clean up a man's mess. Let's send those bad boys a flying.
I don't think so.
the characters' voice lines are pretty forgettable except this one from Mr. Incredible, which will ring in my ear as I'm in the gym.
I gotta get in shape. I gotta get in shape.
Speaking of sound design, a fun fact for you. Michael Giacchino, the guy who composed the freaking score for the movie, also made music for the game. In general, maps are easy to navigate. You can squeeze by enemies if you don't really want to deal with their BS, and you face the same amount of bots as you do people. There are even stats shown at the end of each mission, which to me makes it feel more like an arcade than adventure game. As promised, there are some extra features that may redeem this title for you. The enemies our heroes face are crucial in shaping a film's identity, which is why the standout addition in this game is the expanded enemy variety. Take the apartment Inferno scene for example. Bob and Lucius in the movie are focusing on escaping the building while saving its residents. While in-game, you're also fighting these CDA suits with flamethrowers. Maybe they worked for Syndrome. And speaking of Syndrome, on his base you have your usual henchmen, but also these flying guys and these dudes with the shields who stumped me for a second. On the robotics side, Mr. Incredible faces swarms of turrets and drones. These robot tanks pop up multiple times throughout the playthrough, and while I'm not a fan of fighting them, it's still cool to see the unexpected. Bon Voyage is a minor villain in both versions, but at least in the game, his story arc is given more depth through these bank heist levels. When playing those missions, you learn more about the weapons that he and his henchmen use. You experience a bit of the frustration that Mr. Incredible feels as he chases down Buddy.
Fly home, buddy. I work alone.
And you get the closure of beating Bon Voyage. If you enjoyed Nomanison's Island, you're gonna have a fun time in the second half of this game. Again, using the layout as a guide, the game adds extra areas which weren't explored in the film. Like in the Incredible mission as you're whizzing in and out of buildings in the forest, and ooh, look at these structures. That's something we've never seen before. Or how about these missions where Papa and Mama try escaping the base as they encounter lasers on lasers on lasers. When you ignore the pain of trying to complete these levels and just take the details in, it's pretty cool. Money come get her, she's dancing like a stripper. But who am I kidding? We all want a good game, and let's be honest, not a good game. Not a good game. Platforming issues aside, this game had a lot of potential to be great. I mean, just the concept of family of superheroes is a giga-brain idea. But having most of the gameplay focus on Mr. Incredible is my biggest gripe. Arguably more important, as much as I love the Bon Voyage exposure, we couldn't get one interaction with Syndrome, the main antagonist, like not one. Because imagine, right, a Kingdom Hearts style boss fight with a family and Syndrome, or even just Bob and Buddy, that would be totally wicked! Also, I'll never forgive the developers for the way they massacred my girl Violet in this game. I never mentioned this, but I also played this game as a kid, and while I had a lot of fun doing so, it was really difficult. So if you also don't want to struggle playing this game, use this cheat code to unlock all the levels. You're welcome. I've said my piece, but here's some reviews from other folks. Definitely a mixed bag, with a common thread of negative reviews being the monotonous gameplay. So, what do you think about The Incredibles game versus the movie? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. For you Disney Pixar fans, here's another video for you to watch next.